All right, well, time for an update here. So haven't had one in a few weeks because been dealing with some stuff and trying to figure out what the issue was before I did an update. But as you can see, the engine is out. It's on the engine stand right over there. So we were doing some testing, some tuning on the street, and went to do a couple polls and heard a little bit of kind of a weird rattle knocking type noise at first, and then it kind of went away. And so okay, I thought, well, maybe there was a shield, heat shield or something that was a little bit loose, and it kind of went away. And then did a couple more polls, just kind of down and back, not very far, just a couple miles down, turned around to exit, came back and did one last pretty good pull as we were getting off at the exit. And all of a sudden, the knocking came back, or that rattle knocking type noise, and it was a little bit louder. And so just kind of was listening to it. Didn't seem to change really with the engine rev. Got back in the garage, and back in the garage, kind of revved it a little bit, and then it was gone. And so I thought, well, that was kind of strange. Had started the car a couple more times during that week as we were doing some idle tuning, and everything seemed fine. So I couldn't hear the noise again or whatever, and kind of revved it a few times, nothing. So I thought, okay, well, that was weird, and I wasn't really sure about it. So felt pretty good about it at that point. That weekend, there was a car show down in the Dells, so I thought, okay, well, that'd be a good test, get it out, good little bit of a long drive, and kind of test it down and back. Got a little ways down the road, about half an hour down the road, and all of a sudden, right around 2000, kind of started hearing it again. Put it in 6th gear, down around 1800 RPMs, it was gone. You rev it up to 2500, 2800, you wouldn't hear it, but right around 2000 you would. So it was kind of weird, just kind of being gentle on it. Wasn't really sure about it, and then got a good half an hour down the road, and then went to pass a car, didn't even really stand on it, went to pass a car, and it came back. And at that point it was louder and more consistent at different RPMs. So wasn't really good anywhere to stop, so went another 10-15 minutes down the road and pulled off. And at that point, like I said, it had been slowly, progressively getting worse, and now came up to the stop sign. It was even doing it at idle. So pulled into Quick Trip there, and even at idle it was doing it. Shut it off. Oh, well, the car died actually coming up to the stop sign. Grunted a little bit to start, but it started, got to Quick Trip there, the parking lot, and it was doing it. So there was no oil on the ground. So I'm like, gosh, that almost sounds like rod knock, but yet it wasn't, revving, it wasn't changing based on the RPM, which a lot of times rod knock does. So I thought, oh, that's weird. But there wasn't oil on the ground, so I'm like, okay, I didn't split the block. I don't have a hole in the oil pan. I didn't throw a rod. So I started it again, and it was very distinct. And it was not a rattle. It was definitely a knocking noise, and I could hear it coming from the passenger side, and I could kind of feel it over there. So I shut it off. Basically ended up getting a friend who put it on his trailer and got it back home, and started kind of checking things out, kind of pulled the pan off, or pulled some of the covers off. Didn't see anything obvious, so drained the oil out, and lo and behold, the oil was sparkly. So yep, definitely spun a bearing, and that was rod knock that I was hearing. So there was quite a bit of sparkle in the oil. Pulled the oil filter, cut the oil filter open, a lot of stuff in there. So okay, well, engine's got to come out. So we took the engine out and got it torn down. Basically, yes, it ruined the number one bearing spun. There several other ones were close to spinning and had worn the little tongue down quite a bit. All of them showed all the rod bearings showed a lot of heat in them, so like they were not getting lubrication. So something was restricting the oil, and it had destroyed the one spot, that one rod bearing that had spun, destroyed that part of the crankshaft. So that was not good at all. And like I said, when we got the oil pan pulled off, there was tons of bearing stuff in there. Pulled that off, ended up tearing it all the way down. And even the main bearings were showing some significant marks on them, which is weird because, like I said, the car didn't even have 200 miles on it. So, I mean, those things should be brand spanking new. So, talked with an engine builder a little bit about some different things. He was throwing around some different ideas. We checked. Nope, that wasn't it. Nope, that wasn't it. So, thought maybe when I went to studs on the mains that the oil pickup tube was too low and was at the bottom of the pan, restricting it. Because even like the cam bearing, or the cam, not bearings, so the cam spots, excuse me, were showing wear too for the cams, and just couldn't figure out what. And I had all of a sudden started thinking back to the other times I had taken the engine apart. You know, after I had the problem a couple years ago and it had 5,000 miles on it, all the bearings showed a lot of heat and wear at that point too. At that point, I thought it was because the other tuner had messed up the tune, and we ran wide open on the injectors and basically flushed out the rings, which obviously didn't help, but I had thought that was the cause of it. But now I'm starting to wonder, okay, do we have a bigger issue here? Because every time I've had the engine apart, I've always had to replace the bearings because they showed significant wear on them, which obviously not a bad idea to replace them anyways, but you know, they had showed significant wear, and there's not a lot of miles on the engine. So I never could really understood what that was. So measured the oil pickup tube to the bottom of the pan, bought some Play-Doh stuff, measured it. It was 0.3 of an inch, which is about where it should be. So then I kind of started, I've had an idea. I'm like, you know, maybe I should look at the oil pickup tube. The middle of it, it was clean, you know, that you could visually see, but I stuck something in underneath of it and was kind of pulling at it, and lo and behold, I pulled out a whole bunch of stuff. All that, including that spring, came out of underneath of the tube, back in some like the little crevices and stuff like that, as part of the pickup tube, which you wouldn't visually see if you were looking at it. And so that appears to be what the issue is. There was a whole bunch of gunk in there, some bearing material, you know, possibly from the other time, or when lost the valve. You know, it could have been some of that. That spring, I have no idea where that spring came from. It's a tiny little spring, but that was in there. Plus, you know, it's a little bit, looks like some gasket material, you know, type stuff was in there too. But basically, I don't know if that was in there, you know, from way back in the day when the car rolled over, you know, from the original wreck that I bought the car from, you know, and it was upside down, and that rollover, if that was some of that, or who knows where that stuff came from. But I'm thinking that was the problem, that has been this problem the entire time, was that there was restriction in there because of a lot of that stuff that was in there. And, you know, maybe from the other issues, it had enough oil, you know, initially it was running low, but it had enough oil to keep going. But over the course of time, you know, and other bits and pieces getting in there, eventually it just got so covered that it was restricting so much oil. And now, like I said, even after, you know, a couple hundred miles, it was showing like, you know, you had 50,000 miles on those bearings. And, you know, just running it just a little bit wore it, and then caused that. And then there wasn't enough oil, it was starving, so it spun that main bearing, or that rod bearing. So I believe, finally, after many years, may have come across a significant, or may have discovered an issue that has been plaguing me in the car for basically since the very beginning, for years. Unfortunately, it was a very expensive mistake, because talking with the builder, the engine builder, he said basically One, there's not a lot of bearing options for that crank, so you can't even really put an oversized bearing in it. So I have to get a new crank, which is not the factory crank, but it's a Cobra Jet crank in it, so aftermarket, a little bit higher end crank. But he also said that basically anything that had oil going through it has contamination in it, so all that needs to be replaced. So, you know, lifters and rockers and, you know, oil cooler and all the bearings and, you know, all basically all that stuff. And of course, because I had the engine apart, got to replace the head gaskets and whatnot. He also, I'm replacing the rods because I can't trust them at this point. Sorry, I'm trying to think. I should have a list here in front of me. Oh, he also recommended now replacing the oil pickup tube, just because he's like, I don't know any other, make sure that you got it all out there. I'm sure you did, but just to be on the safe side, replace that. I found out they don't make the oil cooler for the car anymore. Oh, and also the tensioners, the secondary chain tensioners and the primary chain tensioners, since they work off oil pressure. They don't make the primary tensioners anymore. Ford doesn't. They don't make the oil cooler anymore. But my local Ford dealer was able to find a couple other dealers that still happen to have them in stock. So I got like the last oil cooler that he could find in the country from Ford, and the last primary chain tensioners also. So yeah, it's going to be expensive to replace all that stuff. But hopefully, like I said, hopefully this has been the cause of a lot of issues. And now that this is resolved, hopefully she'll get her back together and she'll run like a top. So he also suggested the pistons be replaced, but I would like to get the car driving this summer, and those are custom pistons. So if I had to replace those, she'd probably be down all summer. The pistons and rings and stuff, because he also recommended replacing the rings. I blew all that off with the air compressor. It seemed okay to me, but since he has to balance the crank, that new crank anyways, I sent that stuff to him to a different place, and I asked him, hey, take a look at it for me, please, when he gets the pistons, and see what he thinks, see if he thinks they're okay. If they are, great, we'll go with it. If he thinks they're not and they need to be replaced, then fine, they'll be replaced. Also could be why potentially I had a coating put on the pistons and it just worn a lot. And again, there's not a ton of miles on it, but again, if there wasn't a ton of oil in there coating the sleeves, it could have been rubbing a little bit, you know, getting a little bit of friction there, which also then could have worn it, and why, you know, that coating shouldn't really be wearing off in as few miles as are on the car. But sorry, this is going long. But I wanted to give you a backstory and where we're at and why there hasn't been an update in a while because of all this. And like I said, during the process, I thought about doing a video, but had lots of theories, but I wanted to wait until I knew what was going on and could prove what the issue was. So that is finally what the issue is. As long as it's been apart, I've taken the opportunity to fix a few things. There were some holes in my welding, or some little pinholes in my welding for the exhaust stuff. So I got that fixed up. There had been a couple spots, a couple of the little bolts with, you know, taking it apart so many times that had gotten stripped a little bit with all the aluminum parts. So I put thread inserts in those and got that fixed. I am also going to put these in with the exhaust, just because I don't really have a lot of the rubber hangers in there. Everything in the exhaust is kind of hard fixed, and so there's not a lot of leeway, you know, and play for things to kind of move as, you know, the engine kind of torques and stuff like that. So I'm going to put those right behind the long tubes, so that'll give that little bit of flex there when the engine kind of torques a little bit. And so hopefully that will help. Also, it may help me line up a few things a little bit, because when I was welding things, I think it must have moved a little bit or whatnot. So things with the exhaust don't line up perfectly. So I'm also hoping that will help. But again, sorry, this is probably one of the longest videos. I apologize for that. So that's where we're at. And thanks for watching. Bye.